Welcome to the Friday Show, presented by Woodbine. After a big weekend of racing with Paramount Prince taking the King's Plate, Woodbine's got plenty more on tap this weekend with 4 stakes races on Sunday's card. I'm Bloodstock editor Joe Nevels, and we're doing things a little different on this week's Friday Show. If you follow us on Instagram or if you subscribe to our Patreon, you're familiar with our Ask Me Anything series, where a member of our staff takes reader questions about topics inside and outside of racing and answers them. During a recent trip to Saratoga, we decided to get some industry members in on the action, including trainer Gary Contessa. He was so thorough with his answers that we split his video into 2 parts for our Patreon, and we're going to share one of those parts on this week's show. If you like the video and you want to see more, you can become a Pollock Report insider at patreon.com/Pollock Report. Now let's get to those questions. What can we do to lower the number of horse fatalities?
Well, I think that we've started that process in a really good way. The test stakes the other day taught us that no matter what we do, we are never going to eliminate fatalities, because let's face it, tracks are smooth, but you never know when there's a rock on a track or a horseshoe that falls off a horse in a previous race. What if a horseshoe lands on a track like this and the horse comes running and it's buried under the dirt and hits it like this? His foot's either going to go like that or he's going to go like that. So we can never end fatalities. That was a sound filly the other day. That was a terrible catastrophe for racing. But you have to understand, it's a 1,200-pound athlete running on, if you ever look at the bone in a horse's leg, it's not a whole lot thicker than the bone in my forearm. And my leg is supporting 200 pounds, not 1,200 pounds. So when a horse gets a really quick turn to the right, turn to the left, quite often it's going to be catastrophic, because the downward pressure is 1,200 pounds of pressure. And what happens is that bone will break like a pane of glass. And so we'll never be able to end the fatalities. But we have a tremendous veterinary presence here. They are scratching everything without fear, and we never had that before. We have safety stewards out there that are flagging horses galloping by that don't look comfortable, and we never had that before. And we have no medication, thanks to HISA. We cannot treat a horse with anything within 3 or 4 days of a race. So horses are running medication free. We don't have Lasix on young horses. Those horses are running medication free. So we have started, and we have rules and regulations for the maintenance of our tracks. And you can see by the horses that broke down on the turf the other day, that goes into effect immediately. We have shut down turf racing until they fix the problem. So we have the best safety protocols I have ever seen in my life. But people that ask that question have to realize that's never going to end the problem. As long as horses are 1,200 pounds and not 200 pounds, we're never going to end the problem. I mean, we see, anybody that follows football sees that every single week, 10, 15, 20 guys break something just playing football. So we got 1,200-pound athletes that don't talk to us doing the same thing. And it's just unfortunate that sometimes it's catastrophic. And believe me, it's a terrible day for any stable when they have a catastrophic injury. But the horse racing world has wonderful safety protocols in place right now.
Based on horse racing Twitter, every trainer is crooked and every horse is drugged. How clean or dirty is the sport really? How do I find a trainer that I know for sure is clean?
That's a heck of a question. First of all, horse racing Twitter is the worst, okay? People can say anything they want about horse racing. The truth about medication is we're not allowed to have any. They come in my office. They came in my office the other day, a bunch of people I never saw before, and they said, "Hi, we're with HISA." And they tore the office apart, and there's no medication in here. Matter of fact, I had some calcium powder sitting up here, which is just a calcium supplement for young horses. They took tests on it and everything else to make sure I wasn't masking anything. And we are under the scrutiny of the federal government, so no one is cheating. My feeling is, if you can get a trainer who talks to you and explains things to you and respects the fact that you have to pay $3, $4, $5,000 a month to support a horse, that's a good trainer for you. We have finally reached the plateau where we are all on a level playing field. I think they did a lot to get rid of the bad guys, and everybody knows who the bad guys are, so I don't have to mention that. But trainers should cater to the owners. Many of them do not, and I don't understand that. Anybody that's giving me $4,000 or $5,000 a month to train a horse for him, I answer his phone calls, I answer his emails, I talk to him, I explain things to him, I don't give him any negative surprises. Trainers should be more open to talking to owners. You should be able to interview a trainer. You should call a trainer who answers his phone. If you're thinking of getting in the game, find a trainer who will talk to you, because you shouldn't be an afterthought as an owner. You're putting a lot of money into a very questionable game where there are things that you just don't know, and they should all be explained to you and not be taken advantage of. But I think, to say the least, Twitter is nonsense. Okay, I can think of a better word, but it's not family friendly. But Twitter, people that are on Twitter, we must consider the source. If Bill Mott is on Twitter saying something about horses, listen to him. If I'm on Twitter saying something about horses, it's an educated opinion. But when somebody you've never heard of, who's sitting in a dark room somewhere throwing out nastiness on Twitter, says something, consider the source. Because the source, quite often on Twitter, is a very uneducated, unrealistic source.
What additional changes or improvements to horse racing do you think are essential for it to survive and thrive?
I think that on this side, on the training side with HISA and everything else, we're doing a really good job when we're heading in the right direction. I think we're going to see HISA trickle down to the 2-year-old sales and other dark areas of the racing industry, and I'm really proud of what they've done so far. I know there's a learning curve with HISA. I don't love everything they've done. I'm not singing their praises, but I think they're very much headed in the right direction. I think racing management has to get on board with making the fan experience a better experience. Now, I see some things that NYRA's done that are a positive, but horse racing is a sports venue. If you go to a baseball game, it's not just a baseball game. I go to Mets. I'm a Mets fan, so I'm used to pain, okay? I go to the Mets game and I enjoy the entertainment. In between innings, they're shooting t-shirts into the crowd. They're doing trivia stuff with the crowd. They have giveaways. They have good food. They have dancers. They have music. They have walk-up music for the big-time athletes. Why don't we have walk-up music for the big-time horse athletes? You know, I see NYRA starting to have the sparks and the smoke coming out with the jockeys coming out of the jocks room, but we could do so much more. Saratoga is the exception. We have the food trucks, we have stuff for kids, we do it right, but we do it wrong everywhere else and all over the place. We have to do the fan experience. How about guys walking through the crowds with the cameras? Because people want nothing more than to see their children up on the big board in between races. Oh, look, it's, little Johnny's on the board, he's sucking his thumb, whatever. That's what we need. We need to make racing more fan-friendly for the fans. Without the fans, we're dead. The big gamblers are going to gamble, but the fan base is like non-existent at Belmont, rarity at Aqueduct, but there's no reason for a family to bring their children to Belmont or Aqueduct because there's nothing family friendly going on at Belmont or Aqueduct, whereas Saratoga's different. So why is that? Why don't we make racing friendly, family friendly, and make it an experience that people want to flock to? A sports venue, when you leave and say, man, I had a good time at the races today. You know, not just old men cursing jockeys and spitting on the ground. I want a reason to bring my family there. I want a reason for other people to bring their family there. And I don't want it to just be 6 weeks in August. I want it to be every weekend at Belmont. You know, face painters, clowns, pony rides. Why not? It's a very small price to pay. With all the money we have invested in racing, why not try and make racing more family friendly?
What can the average owner expect to spend yearly to keep a horse in training and racing?
Well, I'll let you guys do the math. You can expect the going rate for your, if you hire Todd Pletcher or Chad Brown, they're upwards of $150 to $175 a day, because they use GastroGuard, which is $42 a day, and it's very expensive. So that's why they cater to kind of an elite group of people. Your average trainers, and I don't mean average in talent, I mean average trainers that aren't your headliners, like myself, Linda Rice, Ray Handel. I'm trying to think of the guys, but your normal trainers are training for about $120 a day. So you sit down and you figure out $120 a day times a year. That is your expense on training the horse. Now, above that expense, you're paying about $250 a month for blacksmith. You're paying about, on average, $500 a month for veterinary work, which is just your standard vaccinations, standard medication you may need on a day-to-day basis, because they're athletes. They need not Valium. They need Motrin. They need a leave for horses. I mean, they have aches and pains. They need therapy. So your therapy and your veterinary and your blacksmith is probably going to cost you, on average, about another $1,000 a month. So you can do the math. It's going to cost you about $4,500 to $5,000 a month to train a horse. Times 12 months, it's going to cost you $60,000 a year. But if you look at the purse structure, I ran fourth the other day in an allowance race, and to me, it was $4,900. That pays the nut for that owner, and all he did was run fourth. So if you can, if you can make money in this game now, but it's going to cost you about $60,000 a year. And if you have a catastrophic injury, and I don't mean catastrophic in that the horse is going to die, but a surgical problem. Horse chips an ankle, chips a knee. That it happens. We do a lot of surgery on horses. Surgery is going to cost you $3,000 or $4,000. You're going to have a rehab of about $1,500 to $2,000 a month for 2 or 3 months. Then the horse is going to go back in training. So you have to budget another probably $8,000 to $10,000 just to be safe in case you need surgery. Horse gets sick. It's not like a human. You go to your doctor and he prescribes you antibiotics. If you're a horse and you get prescribed antibiotics, it has to go intravenously. It's about $100 a day, times a week or as long as it takes. So veterinary can get a little bit expensive, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot more expensive to treat your dog than it is a horse. Horses are cheaper than treating a dog. I mean, when I go to take my dog to a veterinarian, I sometimes leave there in shock. But you have to probably figure $70,000 to $75,000 a year to support a horse that's year-round with a horse trainer on the track in New York, California, Kentucky, the top tracks. As you venture outside of New York, Monmouth Park, I think it's around $80 or $90 a day. Park's about the same. Delaware, $75 a day. Laurel, $80 a day. So if you're in a little bit lesser track, it's a little less expensive.
What are your thoughts on synthetic surfaces compared to dirt?
Okay, I think that polytracks are very good, and they have their bad side. Dirt is very good, and it has its bad side. The polytracks, the problem with them is certain horses freaking hate them. Every horse will run to some degree until you establish where he belongs on the dirt. But you have horses that will not run on the grass. You learn that when you put a decent horse on the grass for the first time in a race. You're like, oh boy, he didn't like that at all. He runs dead last. So grass and polytrack are very much catered to horses that like grass or horses that like polytrack. So you can't, the problem with them is if you go to a jurisdiction, like the one that comes to mind is Turfway Park in Kentucky, it's only a polytrack. Or Presque Isle in Pittsburgh, it's only a polytrack. If you have a horse that doesn't like the polytrack, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do. You have to go find a dirt track, and now all of a sudden you have to ship and or send to another trainer or whatnot. So I think they keep horses sounder, but I think quite a few horses don't like polytrack and don't like turf. It would be if you had a track that only had turf courses, like Kentucky Downs. A lot of horses go down there and can't run at Kentucky Downs because they're just not turf horses. So the same with polytrack. But as far as soundness goes, it's true. The percentage of catastrophic breakdowns on a polytrack is a little smaller than on a dirt track. But what you don't see as a novice or as a person who's not back here is that the number of soft tissue injuries on a polytrack escalates. So you have horses that are ending careers off of injuries on polytrack that didn't die, but that never run again. It does tend to cause soft tissue injuries, and I mean suspensories, tendons, different soft tissue injuries that are career ending. They're just not catastrophic. So in the end, when it's all said and done and the smoke clears, you probably have just as many injuries or career-ending injuries on dirt and polytrack. I think it's equal. It's just a different type of injury.
Best book about training racehorses.
Best book about training racehorses. The book that I found the most interesting on training racehorses was written many, many years ago, and the name, I'm getting kind of old so I forget things, but it was written by trainer Elliot Birch, who trained all the Green Tree horses way back when, and he's a Hall of Fame trainer. And if you Google search, since we can Google search anything right now, Google search Elliot Birch's book, and I think it's a really interesting read. I really enjoy it. And the other book that, there was a bunch of books written by a guy about the backstretch. And I can't remember his name, very famous guy, and they were very good reading. But as far as training books, and that's the question, I think the two best training books I've ever read are Elliot Birch's training book and Wayne Lucas's Sermon on the Mount. There is nobody in this game who talks a better game, besides Gary Contessa, than Wayne Lucas. Wayne Lucas's book, Sermon on the Mount, is awesome.
Do you feel all the breakdowns are due to the track, genetics, or pushing young horses too soon?
I don't think we pushed young horses too soon. I think horses, as long as a young horse, now young horses, young athletes, high school kids. My 2-year-olds are high school athletes. They're all high school athletes. My son is a high school athlete, and my 2-year-olds are high school athletes. They have growth plates in their knees and their ankles. We do our due diligence, and we make sure all their growth plates, and growth plates is kind of like the soft spot in a baby's head. We make sure the growth plates are closed properly before we really put them under severe training. So that's a very important part of getting horses ready early. If the growth plates are closed, they are as sound as an older horse. Their bone density might not be as thick, but it's training that makes bone lay down inside a leg. So I am not a believer that we push horses too hard. Now, there are good doctors, bad doctors, good lawyers, bad lawyers, good trainers, bad trainers. A bad trainer might not be smart enough to let the growth plates close on a horse before they push him. And I can't say what's going to happen to that horse, in the Midwest, was prepped by a bad trainer. But the guys that I deal with, my first question when I call down to Ocala in January is, are the growth plates closed? Where are we at on the growth plates? Let's not push them too hard. Let's make sure we got all this thing done. So I don't think we push young horses too much. Track-wise, I think they're phenomenal. But getting back, and you say redundant, the bottom line is horses are 1,000 to 1,200 pounds. They're running at 40 miles an hour. They get tangled up with each other. They're boot to boot. Sometimes they're a little too close to each other. They clip heels. Sometimes they hit a soft spot in the track. They take a bad step. I mean, a 1,200-pound athlete, we know what 200-pound athletes go through as far as health risks go. It's a constant. Even in baseball, which is a non-contact sport, every day you got a major player out on the injured reserve. So 1,200-pound horses are very difficult to keep sound. And I think the biggest problem we have, but it's being changed, is just keeping horses sound and keeping them out of harm's way. And that's the key to keeping horses sounder. So I don't believe that question is correct in saying that the numbers are getting worse. I think if you really look at the numbers from 1985 to 2023, it's been a fairly steady, with a couple bumps in the road. And if you go back to those bumps, you probably find that weather related, track related, something happened to the track. Things happen. Tracks go through a little, I'm sure the graph looks like this, but it's been a downward turn. And I think we're probably approaching the lowest level of catastrophic breakdowns we've ever seen.
Thanks so much to Gary Contessa for being so generous with his time and knowledge. And thanks to Woodbine for their sponsorship of The Friday Show. Don't forget, they've got a quartet of stakes races on Sunday's card featuring some of the best the Ontario program has to offer. We'll see you next week on The Friday Show. Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Pollock Report Insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Pollock Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Pollock Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/Pollock Report and become a Pollock Report Insider today.